You're listening to Blueprint and Soul, a podcast about building from the inside out. I'm your host, Sal Carter. Before we go any further, I want to name the tone of this space. This is not a debate. This is not a performance. This is not an episode meant to harden you or to ask you to brace yourself. Blueprint and Soul has always been a place to feel, to reflect, to learn, or to simply sit quietly and be. That matters here. Because today's conversation touches on something real. This episode is called Building While Black. And I want to be very clear about what that means and what it does not mean. This is not about proven struggle. It's not about ranking pain. It's not about turning lived experience into spectacle. This is about context. It's about naming the conditions many of us were shaped inside of, and how those conditions quietly influence how we build, how we show up, and how much we ask of ourselves. Because building while black isn't just about what you create. It's about what you carry while you're creating. The extra calculations, the constant readiness, the way competence, composure, and clarity become survival tools long before they become choices. And I want to say this gently. Naming context is not an excuse. It's not resignation. It's not giving up responsibility. It's the opposite. Context gives us language, and language gives us choice. If episode 7 asks what happened when we stopped proving, this episode asks why proving was ever necessary in the first place. Not to stay there, not to relive it, but to understand what we're still responding to, even when the danger has changed. Because sometimes we're no longer reacting to what's in front of us. We're reacting to what used to be required. And if we don't slow down long enough to name that, we can end up carrying armor into rooms that no longer call for it. So as we move forward, I want to be clear about something. This episode is not asking you to let your guard down everywhere. It's not asking you to forget what you've learned. And it's not asking you to pretend the world is gentler than it actually is. It's asking a quieter question. Where did vigilance become default? And where might choice be possible now? Let's start there. There's a phrase that gets offered often, usually with good intention. You don't have to prove anything. For some people, that sentence lands as relief. For others, it lands as confusion. And for many, it lands as something that sounds true, but doesn't quite match lived reality. Because proving didn't begin as ego. It began as protection. For many Black builders, professionally, socially, emotionally, competence was never just about excellence. It was about safety. It was about access. It was about being seen accurately, or at least not being misread. This isn't about working hard. It's about working legibly, about learning early on that you may need to be exceptional just to be considered equal. That context matters. Not so we stay trapped in it, not so we rehearse it endlessly, but so we don't gaslight ourselves while trying to outgrow it. Because when context goes unnamed, people start blaming themselves for responses that once made complete sense. And that's not growth. That's erasure. So before we talk about choice or freedom or intention, we have to tell the truth about the conditions that shaped how we learned to build in the first place. And from there, we can begin to ask different questions. When proof becomes protection, it changes the way you move through the world. You prepare more. You explain more. You think 3 steps ahead, not because you're anxious, but because you've learned that being ready is safer than being surprised. You don't just show up. You arrived armed with clarity, tone calibrated, receipts ready, language precise. Not to impress, but to avoid friction. This isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. It's learned over time that ease isn't always extended equally, and that being on can reduce risk. So proof becomes a shield. Confidence becomes cover. Excellence becomes insulation. And slowly, quietly, what started as strategy becomes habit. Here's where it gets complicated. When proof is protective, letting go doesn't feel like confidence. It can feel like exposure. But the body remembers what happened when readiness slipped, when preparation wasn't enough, when intention was misread, when benefit of the doubt wasn't available. So vigilance stays online, not because you don't trust yourself, but because you don't always trust the room. And over time, that vigilance can start to feel like identity. You don't just do well, you are the one that does well. You don't just show up prepared, you're the dependable one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't drop the ball. There's pride in that, but there's also cost. Because when proof becomes constant, the nervous system never really stands down. You don't just work, you brace. You don't just speak, you calculate. You don't just rest, you monitor whether rest is earned. This is where exhaustion gets mislabeled. Burnout gets framed as weakness. Boundaries get framed as attitude. And rest starts to feel like a risk instead of repair. But here's the truth I want to gently name. What protected you then may be constraining you now. not because it was wrong, but because it was built for a different season. And recognizing that isn't failure, it's discernment. The question isn't, why did I build this way? The question is, what am I still protecting myself from? And does it still require this level of armor? We don't answer that yet. We just notice it. There's a question we don't ask often enough. Who benefits when proving never stops? Because when something feels personal for long enough, it's easy to forget it may also be structural. When proving becomes constant, institutions benefit. Workplaces benefit. Systems built on productivity, output, and performance benefit. They benefit from your readiness, your reliability, your willingness to carry more than your share without naming the cause. And over time, what was once adaptive gets quietly normalized. Extra effort becomes expectation. Emotional labor becomes invisible. Excellence becomes the baseline, not the bonus. Meanwhile, the individual pays. Emotionally, physically, relationally. And for many of us, that cost isn't theoretical. It's lived. It shows up in how alert the body stays, in how quickly we scan rooms, and how often we prepare for consequences we didn't create. Not because we're pessimistic, but because unpredictability was real. Because misreading a room carried weight. Because being perceived incorrectly wasn't neutral. It had life-changing impact. This is the part that often goes unnamed. The armor didn't come from nowhere. This isn't a call to withdraw. It's a call to see clearly. Because clarity is what allows choice to return. So what does choice actually look like when the conditions haven't changed? Not the ideal conditions, the real ones. Reclaiming choice doesn't mean pretending the risk disappears. It means learning how to move without carrying more than the moment requires. Because the truth is, many of us are not deciding whether to build. We're deciding how much of ourselves we can give to the build and at what cost. Choice, in this context, isn't loud. It shows up quietly in where you place your effort and how long you stay on, and whether you respond immediately or let something wait. It's not about doing less. It's about doing what's necessary without automatically doing more. And this is where discernment replaces instinct. Because instinct was shaped in survival. Discernment is shaped in awareness. Here's a moment that clarified this for me. There was a situation where I was fully capable of stepping in, carrying extra weight, and making sure everything landed cleanly. No one asked me to. No one expected it out loud. But I can feel the familiar pull, that reflex to prove usefulness before it was questioned. And for the first time, I paused. Not to withdraw, not to protect my ego, but to ask a more accurate question. Is my contribution needed here? Or is my readiness simply assumed? The answer didn't change the environment, but it changed my response to it. I chose to stay engaged without absorbing responsibility that wasn't mine. That wasn't comfort. That was calibration. This is what reclaiming choice looks like here. Not disengaging, not denying reality, but deciding with clarity where your energy belongs and where it doesn't. Because sustainability isn't built by pretending the load is lighter. It's built by carrying only what's yours to carry. That's not avoidance. That's strategy. This week's From the Community is going to be slightly different. This week, I'm not answering a single question. I'm noticing a pattern. I've heard from listeners who are dependable, capable, and quietly exhausted. People who want to contribute, but are now questioning when contribution turned into obligation. Their reflection matters, and you're not alone in it. Before we move forward, I want to shift us from reflection into navigation. Not to rush past what you're noticing, but to give it somewhere to land. These are today's blueprint tips. Blueprint tip number 1. Notice where proven is strategic versus extractive. Not all proven is harmful. Strategic proven has an end. Extractive proven does not. What this can look like: choosing where excellence is required and not everywhere is simply expected. Blueprint tip number 2. Legibility is not the same as safety. Being understood doesn't always mean being protected. Sometimes clarity increases access. Sometimes it increases demand. How this can show up: stop over-explaining in rooms that already benefit from your insight. Blueprint tip number 3. Rest is a structural decision. Rest isn't just personal. It's often the first boundary against systems that normalize overextension. What this can look like: building rest into workflows, not just weekends. Before we close, I want to take a moment to slow things down, because everything we talked about today lives in the mind, but lands in the body. This is today's soul segment. This episode stirs something in you that makes sense. We talked about patterns that live, not just in thought, but in muscle memory. So wherever you are right now, take a breath that doesn't need to perform. There's nothing you need to prove in this moment. Nothing you need to carry forward unless it's yours to carry. You are allowed to rest without pretending the world is safe. You are allowed to be discerning without staying braced. If proving has been an armor for you, honor that. It kept you moving. It kept you building. But armor doesn't have to stay on once the moment has passed. Tonight or today, let yourself notice what it feels like to loosen it, even slightly. Not to abandon it, just to remember that you are more than what you've had to survive. As you move into the rest of your week, hold this question gently. What am I still protecting myself from? And what would it feel like to need a little less armor here? If this episode gave you language or helped you see a pattern more clearly, let that be enough for now. You don't need to fix anything tonight. Awareness is already movement. And if you want to keep this conversation going, you're always welcome to reach out. You can send questions or reflections to blueprintandsoulpod@gmail.com or share them with us on Instagram @blueprintandsoul. Thank you for trusting this space. Thank you for bringing your full self, your thinking, your feeling, your becoming. And until next time, build with intention and lead with soul.